Bien, compañeros, vamos a continuar la siguiente lección. Estamos ubicados en nuestra página 13 de nuestro libro de trabajo y tenemos este tema de la gramática. Es un poco repetitivo, pero viene el nuevo tema de a lot of and lots of. Como siempre, vamos a comenzar explicándolo en inglés y al final hacemos un repaso en español. So, on page 13 we have to learn the difference between the grammar points much, many, lot of, and lots of, alright? And we have also an exercise that we have to answer. Now let me write it right here on the chalkboard, talking about the grammar that we have to understand. That will be so, which is the difference between much, many, lot of, and lots of, alright? Now, is there a difference? Let's go into to explain the difference. Alright, as we already learned, we are going to use much for uncountable nouns. Alright, we are going to use much for talking about uncountable nouns, such as the thing that we already explained, right? Like liquids. For example, what else could be? Like the sugar, or even the coffee, right? Those are things that we can count, that we don't have to count, right? So, much for uncountable noun, such as liquids or other things like sugar or coffee. Now, many. We already learned that we are going to use many for talk about plural countable nouns, right? Such as fruits or vegetables. Right? Now, we are going to use a lot of, and we also are going to use lots of when we are talking about a plural noun and when we are talking about an uncountable noun. This is the scenario when we are going to use lot of and lots of. Let's go into read. Alright? That will be right there, alright? Plural nouns and uncountable nouns. That's when we are going to use lot of and lots of. Now let's go into write an example. In our book, in our workbook, we have an example on page 13, right? And will be there isn't much milk in the refrigerator, right? Now let's go into add something like there is alright, now let's go to write another example. It will be there isn't much rice in this meal. Right? Talking about something that we can count. Alright? Talking about something that we can count. Or there isn't much sugar in this coffee. For example, right?
there isn't much sugar in this coffee or in this, I don't know, juice. And that's how are we going to use much for uncountable nouns such as liquids or things like sugar, coffee, the rice, things that we can't count, right? On the other hand, we are going to use many when we have plural countable nouns, such as fruits and vegetables, as I already explained to you guys. Will be something like there are many tomatoes in this salad, right? There are many tomatoes in these salads. There are many mushrooms in these salads. Anything you want. You just need to understand the difference between when you are going to talk about a plural countable noun, you have to use many. Now, the last example that we have to understand will be lot of and lots of, alright? Now, let's go to write an example. I drink a lot of wine during my sister's wedding. Let's going to use simple present in this example, right? On the next video, we are going to learn simple past. Well, just for an example, let's going to use simple present. I drink a lot of wine during my sister's wedding. We are talking about an uncountable noun. Alright? Why? Because we already learned that the liquids are something that we can count, such as the wine. Now, let's going to refer that in Spanish. Bien, hagamos una pequeña pausa para explicarlo en español. En esta parte, el libro repite un poquito el tema que ya hemos aprendido en la página pasada. La diferencia es que en vez de poner how much o how many, el libro nos enseña la diferencia entre much y many, que es prácticamente la misma que ya aprendimos. Recuerden, vamos a utilizar much para sustantivos incontables. Por ejemplo, los líquidos son cosas que no podemos contar. El azúcar, el café o el arroz, en este ejemplo. ¿Cuánta azúcar tiene un jugo o cuánto azúcar tiene un café? Es algo que no podemos contar, es un sustantivo que no podemos contar, entonces utilizaremos much. Por el contrario, como ya aprendimos, utilizaremos many cuando tengamos sustantivos que podamos contar, tales como las frutas o los vegetales. Hay muchos tomates, there are so many mushrooms in this salad, o hay muchos en esta ensalada. ¿Okay? La diferencia, aprendemos la primera diferencia. Lot of, we are going to use it when we have an uncountable noun. I drank a lot of wine during my sister's wedding. Bien, aprendamos el primer ejemplo. Un sustantivo incontable que ya aprendimos. El vino es un sustantivo incontable porque es un líquido. Entonces, en el ejemplo utilizaremos a lot of. Vamos a borrar ese para ponerlo con lots of. That will be. This is just an example, right? This is just an example. I used to have lots of problems with my ex-wife, right? I used to have lots of problems with my ex-wife. Or I used to have lots of, let's going to write something like chalkboards in this office. Alright? Solía tener muchos problemas con esta persona, ¿no? Por poner un ejemplo. Or with my calcium. Right? We can use the things that we already learned. Solía tener muchos problemas con mi primo. Talking about some nouns that we can count, alright? So, that is going to be the difference between when we are going to use much, many, on the other hand, when do we have to use lots of or lot of, alright? And that's the explanation that we have on page 13, alright, in our workbook. Now, let's going to move on. On page 14, on page 15, 16 and 17, we have to talk about eating habits, alright? Now, let's going to see that topic. Bien, avanzando, vemos que en las páginas subsecuentes, por ejemplo, en nuestra página 14, 15, 16, 17, prácticamente el término de la unidad 1, vamos a hablar sobre nuestros hábitos alimenticios. Como he explicado en anteriores ocasiones, hay que aprender el vocabulario que tenemos en nuestro libro para poder expresarnos. Tenemos, o bueno, el libro nos presenta cómo se dicen algunos sustantivos que son realmente sencillos, entonces hay que aprenderlos a fin de que podamos expresar nuestros gustos. ¿Cómo podemos hablar de nuestros hábitos alimenticios? Let's go to change the topic and let's going to talk about my eating habits, alright? My eating habits is going to be the next topic. Alright, now the same thing. If you want to talk about your eating habits, right? The only thing that you have to use is a topic that actually we already learned when we were in the first semester. Do you remember what the topic talking about the frequency adverbs? Right? On first semester we learned the frequency adverbs. Do you remember that? It was always, now, let's going to use this topic that we learned when we were in first semester. Frequency adverbs. Talking about your eating habits, you can use them. Alright? Another question will be, how often? How often do you eat? And now let's go to learn the vocabulary that we have. Healthy food, young food, fast food, alright? Now again, the question will be, how often do you eat? What do we need? Just the vocabulary. How often do you eat? And let's go into write. How often do you eat young food? How often do you eat fast food? How often do you eat healthy food? And we can use, as an answer, we can reply, well, once a week. For example, right? How often do you eat junk food? Well, twice a week. And how often do you eat healthy food? Hardly ever. I should do that. Hardly ever. I should do that. Alright? What other things that can we understand? Can we use? Can we write? Once a week, twice a week, or we can use the things that we have on our book, alright? On our book we have this thing will be, let's go into write it. For example, let's go into check that in our book, alright? On page, let me see which page will be. We can use also I usually, right? I usually. And that will be, for my breakfast, I usually eat, drink. What I really like to eat, to drink is, and we just have to use the vocabulary. We can use the frequency occurs when we want to talk our eating habits. We can use this kind of expression also. Well, actually once a week, twice a week. And we just need to understand will be junk food, fast food, and health food. We just need to understand the vocabulary that we have. Other things that we can use will be that will be right. For my breakfast, I usually eat or lunch or at dinner. What I like to eat. Now let's go to make that explanation in Spanish.
Bien, para hablar de nuestros hábitos alimenticios, podemos utilizar los adverbios de frecuencia, que son los que borré hace un momento. Recuerden, siempre, casi siempre, en ocasiones, difícilmente o nunca. Podemos utilizar también estas expresiones una vez a la semana, 2 veces a la semana, etc. Y solamente aprender un nuevo vocabulario que viene en el libro. Comida chatarra, comida rápida o comida saludable. Podemos utilizar esta pregunta.
How often do you eat?
And solo utilizamos el vocabulario. Para hablar de nuestra rutina utilizamos un tema que ya aprendimos, que es el presente simple, el cual va a haber otro video donde vamos a hacer un repaso del presente simple y su diferencia con el presente continuo o presente progresivo, pero utilizamos el presente simple para hablar de nuestros hábitos alimenticios, algo que hacemos comúnmente.
I usually eat or drink.
Let's going to write something like,
I usually drink
a beer on Saturday night.
I usually eat
A pizza on Friday's night.
what I really like to eat.
Or vegetables, for example, right? lo que realmente me gusta comer o beber es, generalmente yo como o bebo,
and that's the only thing that you have to use if you want to talk about your eating habits. That's pretty much the only topic that we have to understand from page 12, 13, 14, and 15. And even though we're talking about this part, 1.6, yeah, eating habits. That's pretty much the only things that you are going to need if you want to express them, right? Now, the other topic that we can discuss will be do you remember these things? We can use them, alright? The things that we already learned in our book when we were talking about how does it taste like, right? Like sweet, bitter, salty, spicy. For example, right? We can also use what does it taste like when we're talking about our eating habits. What I really like to drink or to eat is, I don't know. What I really like to drink is coffee with less sugar. And what does it taste like? Well, it tastes a little bitter, but I like it. Right? And that's pretty much the only thing that you have to use when you want to talk about your eating habits. Alright? Recuerden que también podemos utilizar para expresar gustos lo que vimos en el video pasado, combinarlo con nuestros hábitos alimenticios. What I really like to eat is why? Well, it tastes a little salty, but actually I like it. What I really like to eat, for example, will be French fries. Why? Well, or what it tastes like? Well, it's a little salty and spicy, but that's what I like. Bueno, es un poco salado y picante, pero es lo que me gusta de las papas fritas, por ejemplo, ¿no? Bien, con eso podemos dar por concluido la primera unidad de nuestro libro de trabajo. Recuerden, diferencias, how much, how many, much, many, a lot of, lots of. ¿Qué necesitas aprender al final de la primera unidad? Primero, el vocabulario que viene en el libro. No todo, porque es un poco difícil, son muchos sustantivos, pero trata de aprender al menos 10 o 15 sustantivos para poder expresar este tema. Después, la diferencia entre much, many, lots of, and lot of, and that will be everything that you have to need if you want to talk about your eating habits. And if that's how we are going to end the first unit. Bien, con eso hemos concluido la primera unidad y nos vemos en el siguiente video.